Hate crimes against Jews are surging. London was forced to hide a Nova memorial. The New York Times ran straight-up blood libel. Streets are full of protests. This isn't rising anti-Semitism. This is an emergency. How much more can the Jewish world take? This is The Deep Dive. Welcome back to The Deep Dive. Anti-Semitism has been alarming for a while, but this past week, it's gone up a notch, and we need to talk about it. This week alone, the main sign for the Nova Festival exhibit in London was quietly removed by the Metropolitan Police because the memorial itself is now a security threat. Federal prosecutors in Washington are moving to seek the death penalty for the man who gunned down two young Israeli embassy staffers outside the Capitol Jewish Museum. King Charles stood up in Parliament and pledging in the same speech he called out the IRGC to take urgent action on anti-Semitism. Tens of thousands marched through London under death to the IDF chants on the same weekend the Nova exhibit is being secured like a counterterrorism site. In Germany, the situation is getting so bad that intelligence has flagged the watermelon as a terrorist symbol. And in Vienna, Israel's Eurovision contestant taking the stage to the loudest boos he had ever heard and coming second anyway. This is worldwide. What's happening in London is happening in Berlin, in Washington, in New York, in Vienna, and Australia. And looming over all of it, the New York Times scandal that broke last week, basically promoting an unapologetic blood libel. To make sense of it all, I'm joined again by someone who has been on every one of these stories this week, JPost's anti-Semitism reporter, Mathilda Heller. Mathilda, thank you for joining us.
It's always a pleasure to be here.
Good to have you back.
Thank
I feel like we've had a lot of Iran and Israel political, all this drama, but, now that we have a little bit of breathing room, we can get back to, more light topics like
breathing
Jew
room,
hatred across the world,
light topics. There's never so much breathing room with anti-Semitism.
Right, yeah. It's kind of very busy. But I think we have a good grouping of a bunch of incidents that we can take a closer look at and talk about.
Let's get into it.
So I think we're going to kind of go a little bit like area to area, country by country, and see what's going on there. Mm-hmm. So starting with the UK.
Okay.
Quite a few things, hit very close to home. So there's a few incidents that have happened over the past week. I'd start with, I guess, the most unfortunate one in my opinion, which is the Nova exhibit. So why don't you tell us what happened there?
Okay. So the Nova Festival exhibition has been on a kind of traveling tour. It is representative of the massacre on 7th of October. There are burnt out cars and posters and real footage, and it's meant to kind of give an immersive experience of the massacre at the Nova Festival. It's been in America, it's also been in Argentina, it's been in Canada. This is its first time in the UK. Mm-hmm. It's meant to be in London for 6 weeks. And I spoke to some of the organisers a month or 2 months ago in expectation of the fact that this would maybe be one of the more problematic locations for the exhibition, purely because of the tensions in London and the increase in anti-Semitic incidents and the Metropolitan Police's recognition of there being more targeting of Jewish and Israeli institutions. Mm-hmm. The organisers basically said yes, but that's why they feel it's so important to have the exhibition in London.
Right.
It hasn't opened to the public yet. It will be doing later this week. But the Metropolitan Police, which I spoke to, has asked the exhibition to remove the sign at the outside the exhibition because of the possibility of anti-Semitic terrorism, which has understandably caused a bit of a ruckus. So yes.
So the exhibition is still set to go on.
Yes.
They just don't have a sign outside.
Right. So it's more symbolic, It's not that the exhibition isn't set to be going ahead. It is, and the Metropolitan Police told me that they're working very hard with the organisers to essentially coordinate the best security. There's going to be plainclothes police officers and visible police officers, all kinds of security measures. They're coordinating with Jewish security groups like Community Security Trust. So there are measures being put in place to kind of make sure that this does go ahead, but I think they are envisioning that there's going to be a lot of problems. The sign is more... it's more symbolic. It's them saying, like, being visibly a Jewish Israeli event, commemorating a massacre
Poses a danger.
is a dangerous thing.
So with these, like, with these measures that they're working to put into place, will they eventually be able to put the sign back, or
Yeah.
like how are we expecting people to end up here? Like,
Yeah. So, I mean, people who know about it, they haven't actually revealed the location yet. I don't know the location yet, for security reasons. The organizers told me yesterday that they're expecting the sign to be put back up when it begins, but they're not sure yet. It will be kind of a rolling risk assessment, I assume.
right.
The fact that they haven't been able to publicly state where their location is also, it's
No, that the sentiment there in and of itself is
that it's
insane.
dangerous. And the fact that the Metropolitan Police are having to put, like, undercover police officers inside an exhibition and outside, and police patrols, and they have security measures, and they explicitly said that there is a risk of anti-Semitic terrorism. I mean,
And
obviously,
do they, like...
It's not just fear-mongering. It's based on, a precedent of the last few
Of course. I'm just curious, do they have, like, I mean, I don't know if they've told you this or if they're even allowed to say it, but, like, do they have any, like, belief in credible threats or, like, groups or individuals that they're aware of that are, like, actively seeking this exhibit out? Or is this just like historically this is the kind of thing that happens, so we're setting it as, like, a precaution?
So they wouldn't share with me an active investigation detail.
Right.
That being said, I think based on a pattern of the spate of events, there is a credible risk. Based on kind of that Iran-backed terror threat to Jewish institutions in general, aside from that, I think pro-Palestine groups or anti-Israel advocacy groups, activist groups, take a strong interest in events that are
right.
Jewish and Israeli. And if you look at the comment sections on any of the kind of promo, you'll see kind of like, how dare they have these filthy Zionist events on our soil kind of thing. So I imagine that there will be counter-protests and there will be campaigning from that side of things. Whether that is going to escalate. I mean, obviously a lot happens with the police behind the scenes, But every threat that comes to the press, there are going to be 100 of them that don't, because they are thwarted or dealt with prior to fruition.
Yeah. No, listen, I'm sure, like when the exhibit starts, like, this isn't the last we're going to hear of this story.
And it's going on for 6 weeks,
Right, yeah. So there's going to have ample,
Yeah, opportunity.
But, that really goes into this deeper conversation of, anti-Semitism in the UK, like, today. Like,
yes.
It would be very easy for someone to kind of dismiss this off as, like, the police are just being paranoid or scared or there isn't really a real threat. I think it's clear that, both I'd say the government and like the citizens are being a lot more vocal, whether it's for or against. It's very much King Charles made a speech pledging to take urgent action, which we've heard many a UK politician or UK figure say we must do something now.
Yeah.
Whether it will happen to be is yet to be seen, but he did say it. Meanwhile, earlier this week there were marches. And, pro-Palestine marches, chanting death to the IDF, all that good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Shout out Bob Villain. So it's very much whether people, feel a certain way or the other. I think no one can deny that, anti-Semitism, anti-Israel sentiment is still very much a prevalent thing that's being noticed by the people and by the government.
Right.
I feel like we ask this all the time, but it's like from the last time we spoke about it till now, it's like, what do you think the UK is in any way safer for Jews? Do you think it's less safer? Do you think it's getting better? Do you think it's getting worse?
So obviously this is a topic that's closer to my heart.
Yeah.
As a woman who was raised as a British Jewish woman in the UK, it does, and I don't talk often about my personal feelings to it. That's not my job, but I would say it does pain me to see the way that the state of affairs for British Jews. I don't think it's getting better. It's definitely getting worse. And I've spoken in the last few weeks to some very high-level people, both Jewish and non-Jewish, who have really expressed their deep fears for the state of British Jewry. I went to a briefing about 2 weeks ago at the British Embassy in Israel about not just anti-Semitism in the UK, but that was the strong part of it. And I was the only British journalist at this briefing, and I said, look, you can't deny the huge amount of testimonies from students and school children and parents and NHS workers and politicians and just average British Jewish people expressing their experiences about their genuine fears. And I said, oh, did you hear about the stabbing of a Jewish person in Buenos Aires? Ambassador, no. I said, well, because there wasn't one. So why was there one in London, you know? Why are Jews walking out and being stabbed in London? What is it that is making this so unsafe? And I do, to give some credit, and I'm not someone who wants to give too much credit to the British government, to give some credit, they have been putting more measures in place, and I have to give a lot of credit to the Metropolitan Police deploying the sheer number of officers, 4,000 officers, just for the weekend's protests, for example. They really do, they lack resources, but they do put in a lot of effort to coordinating with Jewish security groups, etc. There shouldn't have to be this many measures being put in place. That King Charles announced 37 bills that are being enacted across the spectrum, finance, housing, and 3 of them more specifically about terrorism in the Jewish community. There shouldn't have to be so many bills and measures and funding allocations to combat anti-Semitism.
Right.
Like, it shouldn't be so tangible a threat that they're having to throw millions at ensuring that Jews don't get killed on the streets of the UK. But it is very much a pervasive issue. I spoke to a university student last week at King's College London who had to write a 5,000-word disciplinary essay for essentially waving an Israeli flag outside a pro-Palestine protest. I spoke to parents of children in Jewish schools who are frightened of their children being in uniform. I spoke to...
even the testament that, the Jewish schools have fences and guards and all this high technology.
And as do the synagogues.
Right.
And, just yesterday morning, in the early hours of yesterday morning, to 2:05 a.m., a Jewish Israeli guy was gang beaten by about 5 or 6 men speaking Arabic. He was left with bruises across his face. I spoke to him last night. Bruises across his body. His clothes were torn. He was left nearly unconscious. It's not ideal.
I think at this current point... No, it's clearly not ideal. I think at this current point in time...
a British understatement.
This is a weird way to put it. I think the state of anti-Semitism in the UK is in this unclear, amorphous, but very critical period where, I agree with you. Obviously, it shouldn't be the case that a country has to pass all of these bills and allocate all of these fundings just to make sure that Jews aren't being killed. At the same time, if that's the case, then that is the correct thing to do. Right?
No, for sure.
So that is happening. And also, a lot of just the nature of things that a lot of times, bills, legislation and all these things, you don't really end up seeing effects immediately. So I do think it's going to get a bit worse before it's going to get better.
Definitely.
So this, this trend of stuff getting worse before it gets better doesn't necessarily surprise me. I really just think it's a matter of, I think if we want things to get better, if, the government is serious about things getting better, then it's a matter of committing to the process and continuing to pass legislation, continuing to allocate funding, continuing to oppose sentiment and all this rhetoric. And it's not going to be one day or one speech, but really until, these changes in legislation can actually take effect, which could be months or years. So I think the way ahead is well ahead of us, and it's going to be very long. And again, it's very unfortunate. This is the state that it's come to, and also my wife is British, so I've talked to her relatives and their friends and their friends' friends, and a lot of them are saying I don't recognize the country. I don't know if there's a future here for Jews, and it's it's very unfortunate to hear that. But the government is very much acknowledging it, so they know it's there.
They very much are But that being said, I think there's still a reticence to call out like left-wing anti-Semitism and Islamist anti-Semitism.
Absolutely.
I think, you know, they're very, very, everyone's very quick to be like, neo-Nazis, that's easy.
Yeah.
Far-right anti-Semitism. And a lot of it is, you know, put onto, there were examples of anti-Semitism at Tommy Robinson's Unite the Kingdom rally.
Right.
I'm always getting
But
the names of these
it's so
rallies
easy
wrong.
to catch
But
that out because it's so
they
blatant.
call that out. Yeah, they're like, great. But and I'm not saying it was neo-Nazi, I'm just saying that there was right-wing anti-Semitism.
Right.
Left-wing anti-Semitism, there's so much more of a resistance. If we look at the results of the local elections, I wrote about it last week, I believe, 1 in 10 candidates elected to local elections, it was 574, were elected on sectarian issues of Gaza. Basically, right. Gaza and Muslim issues, but you know they were mainly
classic municipal issue.
Classic municipal issues, and the government came out and said local authorities, local governments have no impact or authority or responsibility over foreign affairs.
Right.
That is a central
no, you
government
don't understand.
issue.
It's all a power system. It's all interconnected.
It is.
You start at the municipal level, which eventually goes up to the government, because
Right.
this is all the UK's fault in general, because they're the ones who divided the Middle East.
Damn it.
So by screwing over my local municipality, I'm therefore
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Anyway, I'm sure that's what they
it's
think.
exactly
But
what
anyway.
they're saying, except for the fact that, you know, most people will say the Green Party never used to get any votes because, unfortunately, they had no chance of getting into power
Right.
based on plastics and
But now that
grass.
Israel's at war,
But now Israel's at war. Wow. They had like,
my
massive
mayoral
influence.
candidate is like a write-in.
They are, and one of the Green candidates was seen driving a very much fuel-chugging Lamborghini the day after, or the same day as getting voted in. I don't think any of them were elected on
Classic
green
Jewish
issues.
move. No, we joke, but like it's actually insane.
We joke, but it's serious.
But yeah,
I think we have to joke. Otherwise we'll
go crazy. But yeah. But I think you know.
So I think that's pretty much that's the state of the UK at the moment, is that it's definitely getting worse.
Yeah.
And I think no matter how much effort the UK government is trying to put into combating it, it's kind of a drop in the ocean at the moment. Whether or not that is going to become a counter ocean, to use the metaphor, I don't know. But it's definitely not getting better as we speak.
Yeah, and again, I'm sure the next time we talk about this on the show, it's going to be even worse.
Yeah,
but I think
hopefully not.
It's this weird kind of like, because obviously like I think there is criticism warranted for the government, and well-deserved criticism, because we see the results of like, you know, how things are today, and you know it's clearly due to a lack of, you know, working policies. But at the same time, while I have criticism for the government, I hope, and I think it's very important that despite the criticism, they stay on task. They don't get lost in like the
I love your optimism.
or discouraged. You know,
it's very reassuring.
If you really want to make, you know, change on a systematic level, you have to commit to doing something the right way, even when the going gets tough.
Right.
You know, so I hope, and I also like, you know, I'm sure we could do a whole separate issue on the state of the politics in the UK and elections and how things are going to go. But the point is, whoever ends up in whatever positions, I just still hope that there's still this clear focus that, like, at the very least, at the baseline, like, we can all still recognize that, like, this is an issue that needs to be addressed. Because there are many a UK politician that would say otherwise, either, you know, minimize or flat out say that, you know, it's because of Gaza and this is actually not a real issue, and like, oh, let's focus on the real issue. So I'd say that's just the bare minimum of where I hope things stay, that we could at least stay on target and, you know, and on message and on focus, and being like, as long as we have the consensus that this is a massive issue that needs to be addressed, we at least have a chance of things getting better. Going over to Germany.
Right.
So this is, yeah.
I love that.
This is like, it's weird.
Germany's weird.
The story, no, Germany's very weird. It's so interesting what's going on in Germany, because it's like, where as opposed to, you know, in England, where it's very much like, oh, there was an attack here, and this person was attacked here, and this synagogue was burnt here, and this and that, and blah, blah, blah. In Germany, it's more subvertive. There's all these issues of like rhetoric that has made its way into the mainstream that poses threats that we don't really see every day.
I agree with you, and I think it's also Germany is
Not that there
different.
isn't hate crimes in Germany.
No,
not
no,
that there aren't
but there's
attacks
difference because they have like certain legal frameworks that don't exist in other places that were put in place sort of post-Holocaust to ensure that certain anti-Semitism didn't happen again, and yet there are kind of ways that this
and
is
just like generic extremism, they try
generic extremism for sure.
they're rightfully hyper aware, so they try to like nip it at the bud, and so you know, the BFV published a whole thing on like secular pro-Palestinian extremism,
Right.
Which was like 80 something pages,
Right.
I think.
The secular pro-Palestinian, they came as like a package. So the secular pro-Palestinian extremism is like a web page, and then there's an 80-page document on signs and ciphers used to code extremist language and rhetoric by going kind of under the radar.
Right.
And they came together.
Yeah. So it's interesting that we talk about the under the radar thing because naturally this received a lot of criticism. A lot of people saying that Germany was really going overboard and criticizing free speech. And you know, you spend a lot of the time in the scope of your job just looking at like discourse online.
That's all I do.
It's all you do. So I'm sure it must drive you crazy every time someone says Intifada means struggle. When people say globalized intifada, they don't mean this. When it's very apparent that they in fact do mean intifada in the way that we know it. But anyway, so the point is in Germany, it's gotten to such a boiling point that they even, you know, they marked the watermelon as, you know, as like a sign of
extremism.
Because I mean, at this point, it's very easy to deflect and say like, oh, it's just a watermelon, you're overreacting, it's a fruit, calm down. But like, again,
it is a fruit.
You know,
don't they do great water?
Don't piss on me and tell me it's raining. We all know what, you know what I mean? Like, people openly admit that
I think it's great that they.
No, that's what I'm saying. It's like
this spade a spade.
This whole plausible deniability, and then like later in the comments they'll be like, hey, I'm using a watermelon to not get flagged by the algorithm. It's like, okay, so like, thank you. Like, what are we doing? Anyway, what are some other notable things that they said? So there's the watermelon. Everyone's favorite, the inverted red triangle.
Yes, yeah.
Which is like at this point, it's like in people's Twitter name. Like it's
unabashedly,
it's like everywhere.
Everywhere.
For those of you who don't know, the inverted red triangle is, you know, over the course of the war, Hamas would publish these videos of Israeli soldiers being wounded or injured or killed or attacks on Israeli assets, and they would use this like triangle to kind of like mark the hit. So it's very much a celebration of damage to the IDF or like in solidarity with Hamas. So that's another one that got flagged. From the river to the sea. This is another one that, I mean, I think all over the world, like I think in America, people very much use it all the time, and there's so much, and they're very adamant that like, oh, this is what it means. And then you ask them, you know, from which river to which sea, what do you mean? Then all of a sudden it crumbles immediately. So I think what's really interesting here is that like this could be setting a precedent, because naturally there is a lot of plausible deniability to like a lot of these phrases and a lot of these messages and a lot of these pictures. But once you have one country that draws a line in the sand and they're like, no, enough, we're going to call a spade a spade. This means this. If you do this, you're clearly in some kind of like algorithmic echo chamber, and like this is bad. And so I don't know, what do you think? Are other countries going to start doing this too? Or do you think this is going to be repealed? Like what? I'm sure it's not going to go down easy, right? Like there's going to be a lot of anger around it.
No, the reason I actually sort of like the report was flagged was because there was so much anger about it on Arabic language media. Whether it's going to set a precedent, it's difficult to say. It's possible. I think it would have to be a specific kind of country, somewhere where there is like more of a crackdown on extremism in general.
Right.
Maybe places like Hungary. Germany, no, it's its own kind of baby though in that respect. I think the BFE is the Federal Intelligence Agency, and I think both of these reports were focused at really educating on patterns and yes, as we said, calling a spade in terms of like, it was specifically the watermelon slice when used to replace the map of Israel was the example that they gave, and various chants, things like child killer. And I really was impressed by the way in which each example wasn't just given like the chant of Israel child killer is a problem. It's a problem because it calls up, evokes medieval tropes of blood libel,
Right.
and this can be used really clear. And then in the 80-page guide, it went through all these different examples of like dehumanization of Jews, comparisons of Jews to animals, comparison of Jews to use of financial control terms, like the Rothschild and Soros, and all of these conspiracy theories, which when said on their own just look like an innocuous word.
Right.
But for the person in the know, it makes a lot of sense, and there is a way of communicating through kind of this symbolic language.
Right. It's like we both know what we mean, but we're not.
Right. But to someone else, or someone who wants to deny, they can just, freedom of speech.
Yeah, I always love the financial ones because it's like I'm a Jew in the media. Like, where the hell is my check? Like, I don't.
Yeah,
I
know.
understand.
I'm still waiting.
Yeah,
guys, if you want to say,
there is there really is like a almost prophetic irony that like of all the places, Germany is the first country to be like, hey, maybe don't insinuate that like Jews are an octopus who's like controlling the world banks.
Right.
Like, who would have thunk? But here we are.
And
but,
they're very, especially the German authorities are very, very good about taking ownership. Like a lot of the examples in the 80-page report were of like cartoons from Der Sturm, back in the Nazi times, comparing them to kind of stuff that are being seen today and showing how actually these
very
signs
similar, by the way,
pervasive. The octopus with tentacles controlling the world and the money grabbing Jew. You see them today. It's this.
By the way, I don't know if you had a chance to see it because I think this came out today or late last night, but today as we're recording this. But did you see Francesca Albanese's latest? How it's time for Germans to get over their Holocaust guilt, and they're too loyal to Israel because of it, and they need to stop feeling the shame.
A good therapist would say she was projecting.
I mean, I think it's just very clear what she's trying to do, whereas where you're aware of what these atrocities can lead to, you publish a report about nipping it in the bud, whereas if you're unabashed about it, you just continue to do it, and then people continue to get attacked. Right. So I think it's very clear what the goal there is.
Yeah, I know. So I think whether or not Germany has set a precedent is difficult to say, and I do think that they tackle extremism that isn't just like based on anti-Semitism. It's something that's a big focus for them in terms of, for example, the stuff around the I don't speak Turkish, but the Turkish religious authority that has a lot of influence over mosques in Germany, and there's been a lot of crackdown on that influence. So they do focus on that, but there are still limits to German law, and when it comes to free speech, there is that grey zone. It happened just last week that there was a planned Nakba protest at Moorweide, the site of the deportations of Jews from Hamburg in World War II. There's a memorial with plaque, etc. And the pro-Palestine camp had planned to hold it here. And the authorities tried to move them elsewhere. And then it went to the administrative court, and I spoke to the administrative court, and they sent me the decision, which basically said that the plausible risk of anti-Semitism was not enough reason for them to move the camp, and that German free speech laws and freedom of expression laws meant that they had a right to remain there. And of course, then you have globalize the Intifada and workshops and everyone drawing kind of it's difficult, and that's what I'm saying is that there's still that grey area. It's really good that they have
of course.
these things,
and listen, there will be instances of free speech that are still offensive but protected by law. And that's just the nature of it. That's fine.
Yeah, I think it's also a case by case basis, though.
Of course, but I think it's definitely the right direction, and I think it's bold, and it's not always easy to do, but it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
To be able on anything, not even just about anti-Semitism, but to be like, listen, let's cut the BS. Like, we know that this is violent rhetoric. You're not fooling anyone.
Yeah.
We're cutting the line here. So I hope other countries can follow suit, even though it's not necessarily, easy to do. At the same time, it's constantly worrying, like the fact that a report like this has to come out. If we then look across the pond to America.
Yeah.
So
its own problem.
Yeah. A few things. I think. I don't think there's like a anti-Semitism emergency in America where there's compared to other places in the world. Credit where credit's due, even if it was very kitschy. I think the fact that there was the whole 250th National Shabbat
Right.
You know,
For sure.
that's like a country that has a widespread, massive anti-Semitism problem to the state of like some countries in Europe. Just because of own internal political reasons, they wouldn't be able to do that.
For sure.
So I think that already just like a fact, you know what I mean? Like
No.
the fact that at the governmental level, you can unabashedly just talk about Jew stuff, I think itself is an indicator.
Yeah.
I think. Again, there is very much anti-Semitism in America. I'm not saying there isn't, but I think like as a whole collective, I think it's not to the same level. I think American Jews don't feel as endangered all the time, independent of like the spectrum of feelings on Judaism and Israel that's going on in America. I think as a whole, Jews don't feel as unsafe, as opposed to like what we hear from like diaspora communities in Europe, where people say, I don't see a future in my country, where people say I'm afraid to leave the house with a kippah, stuff like that. Like I think.
Yeah.
That being said, there are some things over the past week that we definitely need to talk about.
Go on.
So this was less of a anti-Semitic incident, more of like a follow-up, which is that the DOJ has the intent to seek the death penalty for Elias Rodriguez, who was the guy who killed two, I believe it was Washington embassy staff. Yeah. So you spoke to some of the friends of the victims.
Right.
And what did they have to say about that?
Yes, I did. So the filing of intent, obviously, it hasn't gone to that trial yet, but the filing of intent was them saying that Elias Rodriguez's actions met the judicial threshold to justify the death penalty being a punishment, including the killing of a foreign diplomat, and also the aggravating factors, including his extremist views and his history with kind of anti-Semitism, etc. So they're seeking that death penalty. I then went to the friends, the two victims, Yaron Lischinsky and his soon-to-be fiancée, Sarah Milgram. I spoke to Yaron's friends, a couple of them, who said that while the death penalty might be the most justified punishment for the murder of their friend, that Yaron himself would likely have not wanted that. Now, Yaron and his family were Messianic Jews. And at his funeral, his family eulogized that they would forgive Elias Rodriguez and that they would seek kind of kindness, forgiveness. And that was very much their kind of value around forgiveness and kindness and retribution, I guess. So when I spoke to his friends, they said that Yaron, would most likely have not sought the death penalty. He would have also chosen the line of forgiveness, and I think that's really interesting. It shows that there can be that conflict, especially, but it's hard to advocate for someone's views if they're not here to advocate for them. And obviously, the judicial system in the U.S. will take its own course.
No, of course. I mean, like, I don't know. It's like a very tricky topic because I mean, always like the capital punishment is a question of like, is this restitution? Is this really going to achieve whatever? But like, I understand that like the development of the news was the DOJ filing the request, but when I think about this story, what continues to bother me, aside from the obvious horrific murder, was like the two main things that really bother me about this story are if you remember the clip of him being arrested.
I did it for Gaza.
Yeah, like just after he murdered them, he wasn't. There was no look of shame.
No remorse.
He's very proud, very clear-headed too, and also the reactions online of people saying he did nothing wrong. Like it's that
there's definitely an issue, maybe more so in America. Didn't mean to point. I'm not.
No.
America, with sort of martyrdom of left-wing figures.
Yeah.
It happened. I spoke to her about it with one of Yaron's friends about the risk sometimes of, giving a death penalty sentence to a figure like Elias Rodriguez or like Luigi Mangione, who killed, or is alleged to have killed, I don't know, I haven't followed that.
We're not going to jump on that on this podcast.
Alleged to have killed the
United
CEO,
Healthcare. Yeah.
Right. So, is that he sort of became this martyr figure, partly because he was considered to be a looker, but also because some people see it as this like anti-capitalism thing, which again, Elias Rodriguez was part of like DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America.
Right.
And these
So I will say martyrdom is very on brand for, who those people support.
very very on brand.
But like
put it
that in
like
of itself, really puts like it's a worrying sentiment. Like again, not to equate
Yeah.
and not to like ze. And again, I know that like, the court cases for both of these are still are still going through, and I know that obviously like we know that Elias Rodriguez did the killing, and it's yet to be confirmed if like Luigi Mangione killed the CEO. People's reactions to the killing of the CEO, whether it was Luigi Mangione or not,
Right.
I think that's kind of like a like less of a matter, more of the fact that it happened because people feel hurt, they feel victimized, and this is me justifying. I'm just saying like I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. No. I'm not surprised someone killed a healthcare CEO in America where like, and this is me being critical of America, the healthcare system is, we're like the only country that has like, medical debt. It's like insane. So it's like, again, not deserved, but not surprising. But then to apply that metric where it's like the fact that Israel has ambassadors. So now like that's as harming to the world as like, and as predatory and affects you in your everyday life, that like something has to be done about like,
But I think
not even ambassador, but the staff. Like that's insane.
But I think we're in a reality where
they view that
any killing of an Israeli would be justified. It's why when reporting, for example, on the attacking Golders Green yesterday, saying an Israeli visitor or an Israeli resident, Jewish Israeli, was attacked, gets a very different response. But still, they're gonna be hate both ways. To British Jewish,
right? So that's the thing. Like,
any Israeli, whether we look at the Hein Rajab foundations filing against every Tom, Dick, and Harry,
right, who's going on a post-army trip,
who's just like hitchhiking in Argentina,
literally,
to Israeli companies being boycotted, to any violence against like an Israeli in Vietnam at a restaurant,
right,
will be justified. Oh, they had it coming because they're baby killing, baby eating, baby murdering individuals.
Right.
You will still get it somewhat with non-Israeli Jews. You'll have like, oh, that was promised them 3,000 years ago. If I see that one more time, I'm not going to do anything because I'm going to see it again.
Yeah, it's inevitable.
The thing is that like there is still going to be that martyrdom because it's going to be like, oh, it's a righteous act. And you see a lot of comparisons to two particular things. One is the statements of Martin Luther King and stuff like that about like the rights of Black people in America, and also a lot of comparisons to kind of actions taken during the anti-apartheid activism in South Africa, and people saying, oh, like, essentially justifying the attacks or killing of Israelis as a way of saying, like, this is what needs to be done to free Palestine.
Right.
Which is so.
It's not just the sentiment that just the existence of anything Israeli is like an affront to the world that has to be.
Yeah, but even though it is half the world's Jews, half of us live here.
Right. But it's like it's the logic that this is so important and must be done that.
Yeah.
You're gonna go to prison afterwards because you like it.
Right, for sure. And that's why there's a big difference between, say, the gig economy kind of terrorism that we're seeing in the UK and across Europe,
right,
with Ashab al-Yamin. I feel like I've said that so much. That I say that, but where you're sort of getting kids being paid to do like arson for like 20 quid. That means pounds in British English. Who may end up being prosecuted under the National Security Act for something that they have no ideological attachment to.
Right, yeah.
As to someone like Elias Rodriguez, who went in there with intention, who had long-standing views that aligned with the action that he carried out, and who did it and was proud of it.
Right.
He really wanted to commit that act of terror.
Yeah, very much.
And for him to be then venerated to a status of like some sort of hero figure, almost like Robin Hooding. It's kind of like, I'm going to coin that. There's like Robin Hooding of like these figures. I mean, they're not giving money to the poor, but it's almost like, oh, they're doing justice for the Palestinians. So it's like you're a hero among men.
Yeah.
It's crazy because it's murder.
Like clear cut. Yeah.
So yes, yeah. I don't know what the case will look like. And obviously, that's yet to kind of begin, and he's obviously
and I would also argue that like it's probably not the top thing at the DOJ's like list of priorities of things to do at the moment, so who knows how long that will take.
So yeah, that's the situation.
We'll see what comes of it. And then if we go a bit further north to New York,
Oh,
everyone's favorite mayor. So Mamdani has been in the headlines over the past week for a few things.
he's been in the headlines for the past year.
Obviously there was a lot of coverage about him, the plan to balance the budget from like $12 billion in debt to absolutely zero. But there was also some less internal and more ideological headlines as well. Mainly his faith liaison, appointing a rabbi that's linked to Jewish Voice for Peace. And also very notably his Nakba Day post, which generated a lot of discourse. So why don't you tell us about those?
I do feel like there's so much focus on New York, and it's just because of this one man and his antics. So the Nakba post caused a lot of outrage, I think, because it marks such a paradigm shift from the last mayor, when there was like
the last few mayors.
Few mayors, Eric Adams, attending the Israel Day parade, and there was so much. There was a strong relationship with the Jewish community in New York, to then this mayor who seems to just like only want to showcase his pro-Palestine views and anti-Israel views, and it causes it's a strong shift from what was previously known by the Jewish community in New York, and I think it makes them feel isolated. The community members that I've spoken to, it's very frustrating. He posted this, and so with the faith liaison, this follows two other figures. He has two figures already who were kind of somewhat fringe in the city hall, who are in charge of Jewish affairs, who are somewhat fringe but would still consider themselves Zionists. They're just Israel critical.
Right.
And now we've got the faith liaison, who Rabbi Miriam Grossman. Now she is a veteran of Jewish Voices for Peace, who are not that peaceful nor Jewish.
Not that Jewish.
And also Jews for Racial and Economic Justice, JFREJ. Again, not that big on justice, and a bit of a tongue twister. Now, she, is really a veteran of these pro-Palestine she said she's not a Zionist. She said she was raised Zionist. Her father was an AIPAC rabbi. And she said
I feel that's just what they call every Jew. Just every Jew is an AIPAC rabbi.
Yeah, we're all Rothschild as well. Yeah. So she was raised Zionist. She says she's not anymore. She's one of the rabbis for ceasefire. She has attended events with all kinds of different... JVP is famous for showcasing Popular Front Liberation of Palestine terrorists. Right. And
my favorite was the Seder plates with all the Hebrew and being reversed.
The Seder plates with the incorrect Hebrew. Like, again, not very...
Also, Leila Khaled is... Wow, that blows my mind.
It's crazy. It's a plane hijacker. Rabbi Grossman is going to be in the Office of Mass Engagement, which is a Mamdani. He signed an executive order at the start of his mayorship to bring in this office, which is about community, grassroots, etc. So this rabbi is very on brand, but she doesn't represent the majority of the Jewish community. She is anti-Zionist, involved in advocacy with organizations that are widely disavowed. Right. And it's just so on brand for Mamdani to go, look at my Jewish representation, and despite the fact that just drown out the crowd of Jewish voices who are like, this person does not represent us.
This isn't like, I don't think this is like a Mamdani specific issue. No. This is really just like anyone where, obviously, like, I don't think Mamdani could appoint an actual Zionist Jew into the position, or he would get crucified.
He would.
But then, like, when there was an anti-Semitic incident and he posts, like, this is horrible and has no place in our community, he gets absolutely crucified online, and people are like, oh, ew, what are you, a Zionist now? Like, people are getting killed in Gaza. Like,
so you're saying that you feel sympathy for him because he can do no right nor no wrong?
No. He can absolutely do right and wrong. It's just so funny. Like, I love when people, like, fall on the sword and cross to try to appease, like, the anti-Zionist crowd.
For sure.
Because it's
never
actually never enough. Unless you use your position to, like, blow up the state of Israel's entirety, you're, like, a Zionist lobby, and, like, you can't, like, you're not good enough, and, like, you're not with the cause. And it's just, like,
Right, for sure.
It's so like gratifying. You know what I mean? Just to see time and time again how it's never enough.
I'm pretty sure he got in trouble for his Nakba post where he said, like, he talked about the Palestinians who were like expelled from the state of Israel. He probably got in trouble for saying state of Israel and not the occupied state of occupied Palestine. Like, exactly. You can get in trouble for anything. But the matter is that New York is the city with the largest Jewish population outside of Israel.
Yeah.
And majority of those Jews, of course. So every time I speak to a politician like this, they'll say, "Oh, but I spoke to a Jew yesterday who doesn't." I said, "Great, you found one. Great."
Right.
But like the majority of these people are not anti-Zionist, but you've chosen someone to represent them who doesn't represent them, and you're giving yourself a pat on the back for it. And I think it agitates a lot of people. That's just saying.
No, given the size of the Jewish community in New York, it's like it's insane.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, and it's like, okay, so you've got someone who actually can't liaise with a lot of these, you know. Also looking at it in a very practical terms, a female rabbi from a Reconstructionist rabbinical college is not going to be able to liaise with the large proportion of Orthodox and Haredi Jews. It's you know, as much as you want to call it grassroots, there's no
not that the liaison has to be like the highest degree of whatever, but I think
that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that it's not in touch with the needs of
the common theme here is just all over the place.
The common theme is there is no theme.
No, it's just like, again, like Jews are getting pissed on being told it's raining. Like, no, trust me, this is like, no, like, right. Let's be direct about it.
If we look at it was last week, my colleague Michael Starr covered that story, but there was a lot of protests in New York outside, like very extremist protests by pro-Palestine crowd outside of a variety of synagogues. And there was a lot of tension, and there was a lot of hate chants and a lot of anti-Semitic rhetoric. And it's just, a lot of it is just written off like...
Yeah, but that's where the Jews are. Or else
yeah. Happy clappy activism.
Yeah, I think so long as Mamdani is going to be mayor, we're going to hear this time and time again. And to be clear, I don't think he's by any means trying to encourage anti-Semitism. I think he's one of the very few more anti-Zionist politicians who's actually very good at calling out anti-Semitic incidents, and probably more than people give him credit to. But that doesn't wipe away and excuse and let us just like overlook what's very clearly happening in front of our faces. Like, yes, it's important to call out incidents and say that like it's bad, but like we can't kid ourselves and pretend that like, you know, it's all good enough.
I think it's
not
easy to call out something. I mean, like, maybe, as you're saying, not so much for a person like him, because he'll get accused of like being a running dog for the imperialist Zionists or something. But, you know, the same thing as with Keir Starmer, who will say, I call out this terrible rise in anti-Semitism, you know, they're always saying an attack on the Jewish community is an attack on all of us. Great. Okay, great. But like, it doesn't mean
so you're
anything.
under attack, act like it.
Yeah, it doesn't mean anything. Making a statement is relatively easy in comparison to actually legislatively or through enforcement make tangible changes on the ground, and that is not something that
bringing a liaison that represents like 0.2% of the population and pretending like you have everything under I don't know. No, I mean, listen, on the fun point of Jewish news, I think the actual really fun story is obviously Eurovision.
I mean, amazing. I knew it was the only time I said to my friends, it's the only time that Jews and the diaspora are united is when they're voting for Israel in Eurovision. Yeah. I'm pretty sure like the UK's audience vote being like for Israel is just like Jews in London. But see, that's the lobby that they hate us for.
Yeah,
but,
that's us rigging
rigging.
No,
it was, I mean, despite everything, and I can't imagine how difficult it must be to go and sing when you're being booed. And, you know, with all of the awful comments, but the fact that the winner was the one singer as well,
who publicly
supported the Israeli contest.
Oh, listen, I mean, and there's a lot of things to unpack here. I think also like from like the jury vote, we got like double the points we did last year. Yeah. So like, I think
Poland giving us 12, something we never thought we'd see.
Yeah, I think.
It's scintillating.
I think the bottom line here at Eurovision is like everything you read online is just in an echo chamber and they're not connected to reality.
Sure, it's an echo chamber.
And like,
also, it was a good song.
It was a great song.
Like Israel really did a good job, and I'm really.
We had a quality entry.
It was a quality entry, and
And
more than anything, it is a symbol of the fact that despite all of the hatred,
and I'd say like the very loud minority,
we keep doing our thing.
We keep doing our thing.
We do it well.
Yeah.
Great.
And we'll continue to do our thing well. Well, I think that about catches up on maybe a sliver, like a tenth of the anti-Semitic incidents. Yeah. Yeah, this was fun.
It was always a pleasure.
Thanks for coming on and talking to us. It looks like for the Jews around the world, things are going to get worse before they start to get better. But we can only hope that world leaders will finally wake up, hear the call, and actually do something rather than just send empty messages. We'll be back next week, but until then, make sure to stay up to date on anti-Semitism as well as Israel news at jpost.com.